Welcome to the Let's Talk Data podcast series presented by SAP.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 4 of Let's Talk Data. Season 4's got a lot of interesting topics around SAP and different things going on with our technology. My name is Ginger. I was your host for some of the previous seasons, and I'm the host for this topic. I'm really excited to be joining you because this session is really about data ops, and data ops specifically how it can apply in the supply chain. So I work for SAP. I work with in the product marketing department, focused on SAP Data Intelligence. I'm actually located in the U.S. in the great state of Texas, and I am joined by two colleagues who are actually located in much better, the very awesome places to be in right now, Silvio and Cassio. So thank you guys for joining. So Silvio, tell us a little bit about you and your role and where you're located and how's the weather. What's the view outside your window today?
Thanks for having me, Ginger. I'm located in Rome, actually, in Italy. The view today doesn't look like a typical Italian weather of June because it's actually quite gray. So, anyway, so I'm part of the product management team in SAP for SAP Data Intelligence and former SAP Data Hub. So I've been working on big data analytics topics for quite a few years now in SAP.
And you guys may recognize Silvio. He has a bunch of blogs on blogs.sap.com. He has also been, I think, on every season. This is season 4. I think he was on every season, season 1, 2, 3, because I don't like to do anything without Silvio being involved in some way. He's just such a great asset. So thanks for joining us from Rome today. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Cassio, who's also with us. So Cassio, tell us, where are you? What's your role? And what do you see outside your window today?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much for having me, for the invite, Ginger. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Cassio. I am an enterprise architect within SAP services team, more specifically in the business transformation services area, where we basically do customer transformation projects to the enterprise intelligence. And I have been working with data intelligence for more or less the last 2 years. Very intensively. So it's really a pleasure to be doing this blog. I am located in Barcelona in the Mediterranean coast in Spain. And much like Silvio, it's not very typical for a June weather here. It's very gray. It was raining until just a couple of minutes ago. So not really a beach day, but I have high hopes that it will get better.
Yeah, I figured it'd be beautiful there. Here it's just nice and warm in Texas, as you would expect. So the sun is definitely shining. But so Cassio is really the reason why we wanted to do this Data Ops podcast. He's really the one that kind of gave us the inspiration because Cassio, I noticed you recently wrote a blog about Data Ops, specifically Data Ops for the Intelligent Enterprise, and you guys can find that blog at blogs.sap.com. And in that blog, you discussed data ops is really bringing together data engineering, data integration, data quality. You even went on to discuss how it brings together privacy and security to collaboratively help organizations rapidly deliver data to accelerate intelligent outcomes. And I thought this blog was really interesting, and I've been reading other articles about data ops as I'm trying to learn about it myself. And I really see that a lot of times it's specific to analytics only. But you were really discussing data ops in the context of the entire intelligent enterprise. So I was wondering if we could really discuss data ops as a collaborative strategy to meet business needs quickly and really just to drive really confident business outcomes for analytics, but also beyond that. Would you agree or disagree, or what's your take on data ops as for analytics versus kind of really just to drive business outcomes, Cassio?
Yes, Ginger. So I definitely agree with you. I think this is a common misconception because data and analytics, they go hand in hand, right? And I think this is one of the most common use cases for data. And data ops obviously gets associated with that. But in my positioning and my understanding, it goes even further. So we all know that enterprises or modern enterprises in the current market, they face a dynamic world with fast changing demands. And in order to be competitive in this fast-changing and dynamic world, the time you need to take for meeting those demands is getting shorter and shorter. So modern enterprises now not only use data to monitor their operational efficiency in their businesses, or should you say analytics, but also to drive business decisions into new markets and new market segments, or to develop new products using data insights. And that is only possible when you have data that has sufficient quality and is delivered in a timely manner for businesses to make those decisions. In my blog, I touch briefly on those aspects of DataOps, which are, like you mentioned, Ginger, bringing together data engineering, data integration, data quality, and privacy, and also plus the automation of all of that. So these points, they are of extreme importance as most large enterprises face still intensively fractured data environments. This fracture in the data environments is only a result of how this business operates. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just how it is. But how this business operates is that you have several lines of businesses. The line of businesses, they want to have the control and rapid access to the data that they produce themselves. And most of these lines of business, these LOBs, they operate independently from one another. So that in turn ends up creating data silos and data duplication inside the organization, and data that mismatch or and produces duplicate work when you try to reuse that. So having this in mind, of course, in order to kind of like speed up the process to use the data and to make it more effectively used inside the organization, DataOps was born. And as you can see in the name, like semantically, it has a lot of similarities with DevOps as well, which we all know for many years now, which has helped the development organizations across the globe to speed up code delivery and code delivery with quality. So of course we draw many similarities, and they are definitely there. So namely, like effective communication and collaboration within the teams that use these practices, automation, fast delivery, statistical monitoring, and all of that. And of course, then you have all the people, processes, and tools behind it. So in spite of all the similarities, there's also differences. And I think the most important one is the mindset behind these practices. So whereas in DevOps, we have engineers and full teams working on code, and get the code that is definitely the end product, right? Which becomes a software, and the code is directly related to the end product. But in DataOps, the mindset is different, which is you are working with the data, and data itself is not the product, but it's just means to an end. What do I mean with that? Is that so data analysts, data scientists, and data engineers, these guys are all working with data to extract insights, to analyze it, and post charts or create new products and identify trends out of the data. And that's what generates business value. So any time spent on the data that is not actually extracting business value from it, then it's lost time, which means if you are spent time on the data just formatting, aggregating it, checking for quality, and kind of like extracting duplicates and all of that, that is time that you're not getting back, and it's not generating value. So with DataOps, you plan to automate much of those tasks, and so people can really focus on the business value generating business value out of that data. So you can see DataOps as both a cultural and a technical practice, I would say. So cultural in the sense that you have to involve all the people, the data stakeholders around it, and that can be from many lines of businesses, IT, it can be for technical people, so they can communicate and collaborate effectively, but also a technical practice in the sense of perfecting the usage of the tools, the automation, the data pipelines, and so on and so forth. So in the end, what can I extract, Ginger, is I can see like DataOps as being a supply chain for data, being much like extracting the data from the source or receiving it, treating and processing it in many ways. So the many steps you take to verify for quality, the formats, the aggregation, and in the end, what you get out of the supply chain is data ready for usage, but it's still in its raw format, and that's where you can use it in many to derive business decisions, to put it on analytical charts, and to extract trends out of it.
That's really an excellent description. I have a question for you following up on that. Do you think that DataOps is more challenging to implement, perhaps in DevOps, because you mentioned for this supply chain of data to work, it really has to go through many different lines of business? So do you think in that sense, maybe it's at least culturally more challenging than implementing DevOps, since DevOps are at least kind of all in IT? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think they both touch different levels of, let's say, of integration within the organization, but the data side of it is definitely more challenging to it. So we have many people that are familiar with all of the tools out there for data, and of course they have the same level of proficiency as any developer that have for development. But of course the cultural and the organizational side of it, I think that's where we face the most challenges, as it integrates with a lot of different silos. But I think once we can get over that, and that is only achieved with organization-wide awareness of all of the data and the data benefits that we can have, and we have a proper strategy out of it. Once we reach that point, and the organization is aware of it, I think it becomes as easy as DevOps as well.
Okay. So you mentioned that DataOps is a supply chain for data, and I want us in this discussion to really talk about a DataOps strategy just for the supply chain industry. Silvio, I know you work so closely with customers. I hope you'll kind of add on to others that you see. When I'm really looking at examples in the supply chain industry of why a DataOps strategy is important for the challenges that they face. So I think, Cassio, you had an example you said you could share with us.
Yes, absolutely. So a recent example was with a food manufacturer customer here in our market, and the challenges that they were facing was that to maintain the same quality of the product in the production line and to arriving at the destination, it depends on a variety of factors, and that comes from the raw materials which are delivered from the suppliers, as well as temperature and weather conditions. So that all needs to be monitored in real time to make sure that the quality is always the same. So starting with the suppliers and the supply chain, of course, all the data that comes in from different suppliers, it can be manual data, it can be a manual load, or it can be automatically via processes or via delivery, automatic delivery. And of course, those data, so for example, data from wheat flour, that is very important to know, like the humidity, the temperature, the type of flour that is being used. And that varies from supplier to supplier. And some types of flour, some types of raw material will perform differently in different weather conditions. So it needs to be known, according to the weather conditions, what type of material to use at a certain given point. So you can only do that, and to do that with speed and agility, and of course with quality, is to have an automated process around it and to know what kind of data you're looking for. So to extract different types of data from suppliers, but in the end you want the same kind of data inside your organization, you need to build let's say, a data pipeline to transform and to check for quality for all of these different suppliers of those data in the raw materials, but to store it in the same fashion as you have it inside your company, and it can be used to business processes. Well, we can also think of other use cases in the supply chain industry. Let's say warehouse suppliers, which get data from, let's say, from retailers, from supermarkets, and there are many of those, many different types. They also provide data back to warehouses, to warehouse suppliers in very different formats. But inside their organization, they only want data in the same way. So in order to do that effectively and treat the data as it comes in different formats, you need to have a DataOps strategy. So you don't have to focus on the data itself, on the transformation, but only on the data usage inside the organization. Silvio, what are your thoughts around it?
Well, Cassio, you brought up several very interesting points, I think. One that really resonated with what I see in all the discussions I'm having with customers in these years, I would say, is the fact that you talked more than once actually about business processes in particular. So the idea of using data and insights derived from data to drive decisions within actual business processes. And for you, it's a very natural thing to discuss because you work as a business transformation consultant. But if you think of of how enterprises were actually dealing with analytics traditionally, they were mostly used for reporting to the management mostly, so to support managerial processes. And if you actually start using data to drive core processes like the processes in supply chain, it's clear that the picture is very rapidly changing compared to what we were used to do with traditional business intelligence. And I think that's why we see this demand for an overarching approach like DataOps. And I was thinking of an example that I saw at an automotive customer in Europe, where they wanted to actually use the data assets that they had already available to improve a quality management process within a manufacturing plant. So in a very operational process, I would say. And despite the fact that the plant itself was mostly already automated, the quality management was still manual for the most part, I would say. So that's why they started to collect data to help the workers in the plant in giving them information and predictions about all of the pieces that were coming out of the molding press in particular. And but then they suddenly realized that the kind of data processing that they had to do was quite different than what they were used to do, because they had some sensor data that they had to process in a streaming fashion. They had some image bitmaps that they had to process in order to analyze what the temperature distribution of the pieces in the molding press. And then they had the asset master data, of course, so very, very complex structured data coming from the ERP. This mix of data of different nature is what made the supply chain of data very complex in that case, and very different compared to a traditional analytic use case. Because, when the requirement was just to build a report for their management, of course, they were able to take a certain approach. But if you want to build insights that can be used to drive such an operational process, then you have to take a different approach at the way you are collecting the data and at the way you're processing it. And as far as I saw, it's mostly the different kind of the nature of the data itself that drove the complexity in that case, because they had to, at least in their first implementation, I would say, they had to deal with different kind of toolings, one for each kind of data, different properties of those data, and different ways to check the quality. So you also mentioned quality several times, which is actually a critical aspect in my view. It's probably the main concern, because if you start using your data for driving an operational process, you really have to rely on on the quality of the data. Otherwise, you risk of screwing the whole process. So that's what made it complex, and that's why putting in place an overarching methodology and approach, an organizational setup that was fit for the purpose was really crucial.
So if we look at how to apply data ops to some of these examples that y'all have given with the quality and the plant, and also just with the quality, like you said, with the wheat and making sure that those I guess cooking ingredients in the example that you gave, right, Cassio, earlier. If we look at how we're going to apply data ops, and if we consider that data ops, it's not a solution or a tool, right? It's not something that we can just sell, but it's really a collaborative effort, as you guys were talking about, that you need across multiple organizations and multiple types of roles to, streamline and automate. What do you think are some key either data points or key things that have to be considered if you're going to start a data ops initiatives? Like Silvio, you had already talked about earlier, you just said that as companies want to become more data-driven and move beyond analytics, right? The analytics was used for reporting in the past, but now we're looking at taking this and using it to actually make these decisions in our business processes. What do you think some things are that companies need to consider when they're going to start a data ops initiative?
That's definitely the status of the transformation journey that we see happening these days in each and every vertical. Actually, to be honest, especially this year, I would say the crisis is making the change even more rapid, because companies need to react quickly, need to be more agile, and decisions and processes and even business models need to be based on data. So there were predictions from Forrester, if I remember correctly, about data-driven organizations being 5 to 10 times more effective in their business results compared to the laggards companies, let's say, that are behind in that transformation. And what I see happening is that, unfortunately for the enterprises, getting to become a data-driven organization is not easy. So moving from that stage where you have already your analytics stack, you're already doing your reports with a decent quality and so on, moving to the next stage where you are able to empower all of your employees to take data-driven decisions in each and every operational process, where you are able to actually change your entire business model to become a data-driven business model. Think, for example, Ginger of Kaiser, another customer example that we have in manufacturing, where they changed their business model to deliver a service for compressed air instead of selling compressors as products, right? So that's, I think, a good example of how you can leverage your data to change and disrupt and innovate your entire business model. So getting there is definitely not easy, because you will encounter several different challenges on that journey. First of all, the integration challenge. I already mentioned, dealing with structured, unstructured, and streaming data, typically in the very same project and in the same scenario. That's challenging. Or the different ways that you have to process your data. So in most of the projects I see in these days, there's always a mix of different engines, like usage of open source engines for some machine learning algorithms, and then usage of predictive analytics engine from SAP HANA, for example, or other mix of different approaches. Also, mix of different skills coming together. So the data scientists are typically coming with their own set of skills and their own set of artifacts that they've already developed and so on. The data engineers have a different background. The data architects have a different background again. So that's another set of complexity. But I would say that even discovering the data can be the very first tough challenge in many cases, because understanding which are the data assets that are currently available to all of those different people and actors to implement new use cases and innovate business processes, and understanding the exact meaning of those data assets, so the semantics, and being able to check their quality and possibly improve their quality is probably, I would say, one of the biggest challenges we face today. Together with other challenges which are also exploding, like enforcing compliance, for example, and making sure that you deal sensitive data in the right way across the entire landscape. With the deluge of data that we are seeing these days, this is definitely not easy. Or dealing with distributed landscapes, it's another factor of complexity, because we are seeing a strong move for companies moving to the cloud in order to achieve stronger simplicity and agility. But the reality is that this is making the landscapes look a bit more complex, because a chunk of the landscape typically is still remaining on premise. The clouds are often different clouds. One cloud for CRM, for example, another cloud for ERP, another cloud for asset maintenance, and so on. And this is not making it easier to join the dots when it comes to extracting value from the data, rather than just supporting the processes from an operational perspective. And this is what we are seeing in terms of why it is difficult to become a data-driven organization, and why it takes an overarching approach that involves how you're going to set up your organization. So putting together the different skills, minimizing the rip and replace and the amounts of relearning that people have to do, but trying to leverage as much as you can what you already have in place, and possibly simplifying the approach. So that's also the approach that we took from SAP. So our idea was that we cannot solve it all with one product. Of course, it's not a matter of a magic product that solves the issue. But what we can do is that we can help organizations in turning more and more projects to become viable, to become economically effective, let's say, and also effective from a timeliness point of view. So if we can help them to simplify that landscape by delivering a solution that can help them to solve some of the challenges at least, or to simplify the way that those challenges can be addressed, and to support their organizational change, then turning a project from a year and a half to 3 months, for example, reducing the amounts of effort that is needed, allowing people to more easily reuse their skills across a complex landscape. That's I think the contribution we can give in turning in moving from failure to success.
Mm-hmm. Cassio, what do you think are some important things that people should consider for the DataOps initiatives?
Yeah, so much like Silvio said, I mean, he touched some very, very good points, especially on the simplification, moving to the cloud, and the organizational skills that are involved, right? So when you're talking about changing the entire organization, it's not going to happen today or tomorrow. It starts, of course, little by little. So there's always a motivating factor to spark this kind of changes. There's always it starts always with the realization, as Silvio said. So if you can turn a 1.5 years project to only 3 months, then the value is right there. So I'm just thinking about the data quality in the first place. You cannot drive business decisions with data that cannot be relied. And there's also the factor with DataOps, it's not necessary to have data in a single place. The data can continue to lie where it is located, and that can be data lakes, can be business warehouses, it can be anything like that. But with the automation tools and everything, and all of the automation and quality checks aspects that we can have in place with DataOps, this data can become more reliable and at least be centrally accessible for the entire organization. So I'm just thinking in those aspects, right?
So if I want to try to think about some of the things that we're recommending that people are going to need to do, they're going to need to bring in the people that are already working with the data. They're going to need to start to look at some of the key things they're going to have to do across the lines of business, and really focus on the few factors that are going to be most important for their success. So maybe something about focused on the data quality or the governance, and really just trying to find, I think sometimes trying to find a good starting point is sometimes the biggest challenge because there's lots of different things you can tackle. But I like what y'all are talking about of looking at how I could take something that's maybe a huge project and see how can I really focus on that so that I can get the project done more quickly, and really looking at how do I do that. And of course our systems, our distributed landscapes make it quite complex. So if we try to start to tie this, you give us some examples in the supply chain, and I know, of course, we're recording this during the global pandemic that we're all impacted in the 3 different countries that we live in, as the rest of the world is impacted. Supply chain has been an area that's just been so stretched and just so challenged. And I know that DataOps can really address some of these challenges. There's been such a shortfall of raw material and having to find new suppliers, either short-term or long-term. SAP as a company, of course, we've been very involved in a COVID response with providing free access to our Ariba network and doing other things to really help supply chain companies and other companies as well. But if we think about DataOps initiatives, how they can help, so for example, in the US where some auto manufacturers were switching to make ventilators, so there's a lot of change they have to make very quickly. What are some ways that you think a DataOps strategy can assist with a fast change? Either of y'all have any impact, any thoughts on that?
Yes, maybe I can start. So I think that putting just the technical aspects in one side, right, the data aspects, if we look at the organizational aspect, which is one that we have been talking about as being one of the most challenging ones. So much like in DevOps, one of the best aspects that help you in dynamic environments and fast changing environments is the improved collaboration and communication that you get as a result of having this DataOps strategy in place, right? So if you have a free-flowing collaboration and free-flowing communication between all of the departments and all the data stakeholders, that will result in much more productive organizations. So the information and the data does not only sit in silos, but you have those bridges between the stakeholders, between the people, and that is supported by all the technical aspects, will result in an ability to change in a fast way. Also, facilities and the automation that could enable self-service data as well. So that is a big point in favor. So when you have machine learning assisted catalogs and all the data pipelines that are automatically extracting and receiving data and treating that data, and it becomes, and in the end you have an organizational-wide data catalog. So suddenly all the business users, which don't necessarily have the technical skills to access and treat the data and maybe build data pipelines out of it, suddenly become more self-sufficient in obtaining data from all across the enterprise. And the data has all kinds of value. So if these business users are able to access data and consume data themselves, they might find a lot of insights which can help them assist in this fast change. There's also, of course, the possibility with data pipelines and the automation is to quickly change from supplier data formats from one to the other, and quickly modify and change and go through all those steps, right, that we mentioned, to enrich, transform the data to be consumable internally in the organization. And this data will in turn either support analytics charts, which is obviously one aspect to kind of see how the business is doing, but also understand all of the changes that need to be done at a manufacturing level, at the supply chain, to see which regions need more attention, which does not, and even to identify trends and insights.
I was talking yesterday to a friend who works for a large supply chain company, and they provide, raw materials that are used. So they have a big plant in that area that had to be shut down. So they actually had someone living there to keep. They have one, I guess, particular engine that they have to keep running. It's extremely expensive to get it back online again. And when I talked with him and I was like, how is it going? He said, well, they're about at 40% capacity of where they were. And he said that plant is now up and running. And he said that overall in the company that they've had to do layoffs, about 10 to 15% of the people, and they've done pay cuts across the board. But he said he runs the supply chain, the global supply chain, the global data governance in the supply chain organization. That's his role. He's the manager of that. And he said they had not been cut at all. In fact, they are expanding. They are taking what he's done in the supply chain organization and rolling it out globally. So for them, data, and I think Silvio, you mentioned this earlier, in times like these, data has become even more critical. I mean, why do you guys think that that's how this particular company responded? Is it just because of I guess they just really saw that data was the one thing that they needed to help them really focus on what they needed to help the company survive through this pandemic? What do y'all think about that? Silvio, what do you think?
So yeah, in times like this, when the context around you is changing so rapidly, and the behaviors and all the factors in place are changing so rapidly, you can't continue business as usual, and you cannot rely anymore on your experience or gut feeling, which is typically the way, believe it or not, that most processes are run in a traditional approach. So you need data. And we saw it at the most general level in these days with the COVID crisis, because even the behavior of the governments in reacting to the crisis had to be driven by data. And when it wasn't driven by data, we saw the consequences of it, unfortunately. So you need data points to take the right decisions. And typically, the data points can change from one week to the next one, and you have to react to that one. So that is true for governments, it's true for people, and it's true for businesses as well. So that's why I think the crisis is increasing the demand for data-driven insight in businesses these days. And as I said earlier, I think the best we can do from our side, from SAP, is probably to help our customers in joining the dots between the data silos, which is really the main hurdle for them. So Cassio mentioned two key capabilities that every DataOps approach has to consider these days. One is a data catalog that you need to put in place if you want to, first of all, understand and know your data and discover it and get the semantics of the data right and available to all of the stakeholders that need it. And the second one is pipelining, that he mentioned several times. So which is the capability that allows actually company to join the dots between data silos. So putting different data assets together, correlating them, and allowing different processing engines to crunch all that data to gather some insights, because data without insights otherwise would be trivial, as we know. And at SAP we took the decision to actually join those two main capabilities together in one single solution, to try again and make it as simple as we can as a software provider to our customers to deliver on their journey and make it as fast and possibly low pain kind of experience.
Mm-hmm. So how does SAP help with that? I mean, we have, Silvio, you're on the product management side. Cassio, you're on the business transformation side. So how can SAP help with connecting the dots?
So from a product management perspective, first of all, I would say we have to be aware that the products are just one piece of the equation, and we have to act in a way that is consistent with that. So if you look at SAP Data Intelligence, we built a product trying to put together all of those capabilities that are needed. So cataloging, pipelining, data preparation, self-service data preparation, as well as machine learning model lifecycle management, all in one single place to make it simple for our customers to adopt and reduce the complexity of their projects, because we allow them to avoid having to put together 4 or 5 different services and products as they typically would have to do otherwise. And this is already a big step to helping them in delivering on the promise. And then I would say the second point is being humble, because we know that providing a product is not providing the full solution, because our customers will have then to adjust their organization, their practices, their knowledge, and their skills. So for this reason, in SAP Data Intelligence, we made an effort to support as many different heterogeneous engines and data sources as we can, because we know that SAP products and SAP applications will only be one part of the equation in a typical landscape. We know that there will be stakeholders like the typical data scientists who will want to continue using their skills and their knowledge on open source engines, for example. We know that some part of the landscape will typically be in hyperscalers, and we want to support all of those different aspects to allow our customers to reuse everything that they already have as much as possible. So reusing their legacy on-premise tools, reusing their hyperscalers environment, reusing their people skills, of course, with all of the open source engines. So that's our commitment, and that's how we try and help as much as possible.
Cassio, what do you think from your part of the organization?
Right. So just adding a little bit what you said, what you guys mentioned before about the pandemic, right? Why the data positions were not affected, or in fact it was even more amplified, right? So I think the pandemic is affecting all of the industries to some degree or the other. Of course, some are more affected, but it's affecting us all in the globe. And the challenge right now is, how do we want the world to be shaped after it's over, right? So the organizations now can not only rely, as Silvio mentioned, on the traditional models, but to try and extract insights and ideate and come up with new things and new ideas based on data for how they want to continue operating after in the new normal, or after this is over. So I think that's why it is like that. From my side of the organization, from SAP Services, we only make a bridge. We of course have our amazing colleagues from the product side, from Data Intelligence, like Silvio, who are making these amazing products and enabling the customers to dive into this new era. And we from SAP Services can only go into the customer and help them make this bridge, right, to the products, to their own organization. So we have several services to help the customer adjust to the product, help them understand it, and help them change the organization. It all comes, of course, with a deep desire to help our customers be successful, and that's what we have been doing so far in SAP Services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you really need both, right? So Silvio, we need the products to help us really work across these distributed landscapes, but then since the organization change is a big part of it, right, we need able consultants, Cassio, to come in and help guide that change, right? Because it's going to have to be incremental, right? You said it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this has been a great discussion. If you want to know more, I would say just about DataOps and SAP's approach. So you can check out Cassio's blogs. If you just go to blogs.sap.com and search for DataOps, you'll find it. And if you want to know about business cases, we talked about several in the supply chain area, or if you're in another area, if you want to know, if you go to sap.com/data intelligence use cases, all one word, sap.com/data intelligence use cases, you'll see a whole bunch of use cases of different industries that were using DataOps to really drive these business outcomes within their business processes. So thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode of Let's Talk Data. Bye for now.